Andrew Tate's brother, Tristan Tate, has just been released from house arrest in Romania. So what did Tucker Carlson do? Well, he has him first up on his show on Twitter. Like his brother, Tristan Tate has been charged with human trafficking, rape, and running an organized crime network. The two brothers have been released from house arrest while they await trial. Let's play a clip from Tucker Carlson's show asking Tristan about the charges he's facing.
The evidence is junk, because they now have to put a case together.
But I'm confused as to how what you're being accused of constitutes human trafficking.
Well, it's a very loose law. It's a very,
But the term doesn't seem to have a real definition.
No, it doesn't, especially when you understand that the Romanian alleged victims, who say they're not victims, have lived in this country for 10 to 15 years before I ever showed up here. So I'm not sure how the trafficking took place. But in a very loose way, they had to prove I was doing something with women by coercing them for my financial benefit, which is how we ended up with the TikTok story. Because the real evidence they wanted, maybe the prosecutors, maybe the people who attacked me genuinely thought I was a pimp. Maybe they did when they started this. And they assumed that the perp walk and putting me in handcuffs and walking me in front of the cameras would have women coming forward saying they were harmed. Maybe they were looking for real evidence. I don't believe if they knew that they were going to end up with this TikTok story, they would have initiated this attack in the first place.
Tate also talked about how he felt like he was being attacked to get to his brother.
Why do you think they did? What do you think this is actually about?
I think this is about Andrew. And the way to attack somebody is through his loved ones. I'm not going to say that, Andrew got me put in jail. But what a way to get to Andrew than to throw his little brother in jail and say he's part of your gang, he's a human trafficker too. Because I don't even have any allegations of misogyny against me. I've never made a YouTube video and joked about men being better drivers. I've never done any of these things, but I had to go to jail along with him. So attacking me was a way of attacking him, and attacking my personal assistant and her friend, I think, was a way of hoping you were going to turn these women into prosecution witnesses, essentially.
This is the first I've really heard from the brother at any length. What did you think of what he had to say?
Well, for one, it's important to note that while he seemed to suggest that because the women involved in the alleged abuse were Romanian or had lived in Romania before they had ever met the Tate brothers, human trafficking legally doesn't actually require movement across borders or any type of transportation. It's defined as exploiting a person through force, fraud, or coercion, and it can include sex trafficking, forced labor, and other and domestic servitude, but it's exploitation-based and doesn't actually require crossing borders, so that's not prohibitive.
Well, but how is it defined in Romania? Is that how it's defined in Romania?
I'm not sure, but I would presume as much, since I don't think that they would bring a charge about bringing people across borders if they had not actually brought people across borders. The charges, of course, include rape charges. They include the allegation that they misled women into performing sexually on camera for money that the Tate brothers then took from them and not paying them increasingly less than they believed that they were owed, including through a kind of tax fraud that Andrew Tate described in some detail on video, telling them that he needed to take more money out to pay taxes when that wasn't in fact true. He was using it to enrich himself. So that's what they've been accused of. Largely, the media coverage is concerned with whether or not it's right and good for someone like Tucker Carlson to sit down with people who have been accused of these kinds of crimes. I think that's wrong. I think absolutely this is a story of journalistic merit, and no one should flinch away from sitting down and interviewing Andrew Tate or his brother. I think the better question is whether or not any of these interviews are being conducted in a way to try to get to the bottom of what he's accused of, as opposed to giving them opportunities to humanize themselves, generally speaking, and not really speak to the merits of the allegations.
Yeah, it's, and I've actually seen a lot of criticism from people on the right of these interviews, even people who I think otherwise are mostly or even completely on board with Tucker and what he thinks and what he does in general. Given that there is a lot of worry and concern and desire for policy that combats human trafficking and sex trafficking and predatory behavior toward underage young women. Obviously, the Epstein story was something that animated the it was out there in the ethos among the anti-establishment media, the non-establishment media, before it finally got attention from establishment media. There were people talking about this guy and the horrible things he had done, and he had already been convicted of, and still being allowed to do it. And his connection to political figures and celebrities and professors and notable people, that was a story that so animated the same kind of audience that a lot of times Tucker is overlapping with or is pursuing as his audience.
Yes.
So I think it looks a bit weird to be all in. Not even just in like defending these guys, because again, I don't know that the Romanian justice system is flawless.
Sure.
These charges, for all I know, they deserve due process. I know that in the U.S., sex trafficking charges have been levied very broadly in a way to actually just chill consensual prostitution or pornography that I, as a libertarian, think should be legal. Now, maybe they did coerce the women. Maybe they did. It sounds like the most plausible thing that they did is not give them money that they were owed as part of this business. So I don't know. This will hopefully be found out in the discovery process of the trial. But to not just, talk about that, but to they're almost being glorified. They're them as models for conservatism is almost being asserted, which that is the weirdest of all, because I don't see how what they did, what their business is, even if you didn't think there was anything criminal about it, really fits with what the people I know on the right think is a healthy way to arrange one's lifestyle.
Even if you don't think that the lover boy method is sex trafficking or illegal, is, to your point, the idea of telling women that you care about them and that you're in a romantic relationship with them that's exclusive for the purpose of getting them under your emotional wing, and then using that relationship and that emotional bond to get them to either turn tricks for you as a sex worker or perform sexual acts on air for your disproportionate profit, is that something that someone like Candace Owens or Tucker Carlson, both of whom have children and who have somewhat favorably interviewed Andrew Tate and now his brother, is that something that they would want as a model for their daughters?
I mean, they say it's not. They say explicitly that they think, Andrew Tate at least has said very explicitly that, he has a conservative view of what he says, that male-female relationships, women should be married and faithful husband in a very almost biblical kind of way, but then he had this entire business that was flouting those ideas. So I don't understand. I'm not
asking about what Andrew Tate wants for himself. I'm asking about the people who are interviewing Andrew Tate and are glorifying, I think is the word that you used, in some ways, what he's saying and what he's selling to the public. And prior to the charges against him, Andrew Tate's appeal was largely, very explicitly, marketing a kind of masculinity to young boys, where driving a flashy car, making a lot of money, and calling women derogatory names that I can't say on this show was the very explicit aspect of his appeal. So then I would also ask the question, is that something that Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens, I'm not sure if they have sons, but would want for their, or sons or daughters, but what they would want for their sons, hypothetically. And so it does feel a little bit like this desire to say that a conservative figure, a right-leaning figure, is being unfairly prosecuted seems to be superseding a value of a different kind of relationship between men and women. And I don't know if that choice is going to play out in the long run. There seems to be a bet here that he's not going to be convicted of something, that the charges are so flimsy that ultimately he will be vindicated in a way that reflects positively on conservatism, and to the extent that people believe that conservatism is under attack unfairly. But what happens if he is convicted? Are we just going to keep saying that it was an unfair conviction, that the Romanian justice system is unfair? Will that fly? Maybe, especially because very few people in the Tucker Carlson kind of orbit are talking about the charges that are actually substantively being lodged against him. He let him get away with saying, well, it couldn't possibly be human trafficking because I'm not moving women across borders. Well, that's definitionally irrelevant. I'm reading from a New York Times story from the last couple of days. Apparently, one of the women in the in the charging documents say that it has accused a defendant of raping her on 2 occasions in March of 2022 by using violence and psychological pressure, the prosecutor said. On another occasion, when a woman refused to make more pornographic videos and asked to leave, one of the group used violence against her, they said. Of course, the brothers have denied these accusations and called it a conspiracy against him. So, you know, I don't have a problem, again, with these interviews. But what is the purpose of these interviews if you're not even going to ask them any questions at all? The fact that their attorneys let them go on these interviews suggests how softball the interviews are going to be honest.
Yeah, you should ask them about those charges, and they should give their perspective because, again, just because prosecutors say that these witnesses or these victims say that it happened this way doesn't mean that it did happen this way, and they have to prove that it happened this way, and the Tates get to present their defense, and those would be, I think, valuable questions to ask them. But again, beyond whether they did those crimes or not, really doesn't. They don't need to be treated as
heroes, like Julian Assange.
Or
I've heard him compared to Julian Assange in terms of unfair prosecution.
Yeah, but again, the prosecution might very well be unfair. I don't know. I can't tell. It's in Romanian.
Right, but I'm saying that there's a difference, I think, between the underlying acts that Julian Assange is being pursued for, which I think are righteous and good and are journalism, versus the underlying acts of someone like the Tate brothers, which even if they're not illegal, I don't think should be put on a pedestal.
I think it's hard to compare, demonstrating the perfidy of the U.S. government versus made a bunch of pornography. It's not a value. I don't have any problem with it, but it doesn't. It's
not just made pornography, exploited a bunch of women.
Well, that's what's being.
No. You can exploit someone without it being illegal. That's just a word. I'm not attaching a legal definition to it. He very much clearly exploited a bunch of women. The question is if he did it, if they did it, breaking the law.
I guess so. Well, Tristan Tate also weighed in on the guards he met during his 92 days spent in prison and whether he looked like a real criminal.
But what were the guards like?
The guards were very good people.
Really?
I feel like the guards they know what a criminal is and what a criminal isn't. I'm not going to say they knew my case. I'm not going to say they knew I was innocent. But they know what human traffickers, rapists, sexual criminals actually look like because they deal with them day to day. One of the policemen was telling me a story of after a day in court, he had to stay in the police van. His hands were shaking because he couldn't escort the guy back into jail because he said I was going to get on my nightstick and break his teeth in because he saw what the guy had been doing to children. You know, these guys know what real criminals look like. And a lot of them just wanted to make sure we were okay. Is the lesson here that if you dress well and are poised and have a more middle-class upbringing, if your father was a chess master and you have the right outfits, that you shouldn't have to go to jail and that you should be judged differently based on how you appear?
I guess the lesson is we should just, all juries should be staffed with prison guards or something with their innate ability to determine the guilty from the innocent.
We don't even need a justice system. That's right. We should just, it's not judge, jury, and executioner in terms of legal context.
Prison guard, and prison guard.
Exactly.
All right, we'll have more Rising after this.